My phone buzzed with a Snapchat notification that said, "Added to Senior Boys," which was made by Amelia, the popular girl in school. I remember the exact moment it happened. I was sitting in my usual spot in the back corner of the school library, the one by the window that overlooked the parking lot, where I could see who was coming and going without anyone really noticing me watching. My calculus textbook opened to a page of derivatives that might as well have been written in ancient Greek, for all the attention I was paying them, when my phone lit up on the table beside my half-empty water bottle and the granola bar I'd been nibbling on for the past hour. Before I could even process what was happening, before my brain could catch up to what my eyes were seeing, a message popped up in the group chat. "Okay, this is all the senior boys. Who wants to take me to prom?" Those words stared back at me from my cracked phone screen, the crack I'd gotten 2 months ago when it slipped out of my pocket during gym class, a spiderweb pattern that spread across the bottom left corner and sometimes made it hard to see notifications, but I couldn't afford to replace it, and honestly, I kind of liked it because it made my phone distinctive, not just another black rectangle like everyone else's as I sat there in the school library, the fluorescent lights humming overhead, and the smell of old books and teenage desperation mixing in the recycled air. My calculus homework completely forgotten now, abandoned like a ship that had just spotted an iceberg. Amelia. Just seeing her name made something in my chest tighten. The girl I'd been watching from across the cafeteria for 3 years, sitting at her table near the windows with the other popular kids, the ones who seemed to glow with some kind of invisible light that marked them as chosen, whose laugh I could pick out in a crowded hallway from 50 feet away, this bright, genuine sound that wasn't like the fake laughs other girls did when they were trying to impress someone, who I'd never managed to say more than "excuse me" to when we passed in the halls, and even those 2 words usually came out as a mumbled mess that she probably didn't even hear. "This has to be a mistake," I muttered to myself, my voice barely audible in the quiet section of the library, where only the soft clicking of keyboards and the occasional cough broke the silence. Scrolling through the group members with my thumb, my heart starting to pound harder with each name I recognized. Mason, the basketball captain who had a Division I scholarship to UCLA and drove a Jeep that was always full of laughing people. Arthur, student body president who gave speeches at assemblies that actually made people listen instead of scrolling through their phones. Wade, who threw those legendary house parties at his parents' beach house in the Hamptons that everyone talked about for weeks afterward, parties I'd never been invited to and probably never would be. And somehow, inexplicably, impossibly, me, Joshua Curtis, who spent lunch period in the computer lab working on coding projects and writing college application essays, whose biggest achievement was getting a perfect score on the SAT, which impressed exactly nobody except my parents and my guidance counselor, who owned exactly 2 pairs of jeans and rotated through the same 5 t-shirts, who had never been to a party that wasn't a family birthday or a mandatory school function. The responses started flooding in immediately, like someone had opened a floodgate, and all the confidence in the senior class came pouring through. "I'm down! I'll rent us a limo," Mason typed, followed by a champagne bottle emoji and a tuxedo emoji. "Already got my tux. We'd look amazing together," Arthur said, followed by a flexing emoji and a fire emoji, and one of those sparkle emojis that girls always used. I watched, my stomach sinking lower with each message, as 15 different guys made their pitches, each one more confident than the last, each one a reminder of how thoroughly I didn't belong in this conversation. They talked about reservations at expensive restaurants, about their parents' connections, about after-prom plans that involved yachts and penthouse suites, and things I'd only seen in movies. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, trembling slightly, whether from nerves or the 3 cups of coffee I'd had trying to stay awake through morning classes. I couldn't tell. Type something. Anything. Just prove you exist, that you're not just a glitch in the matrix, a random name that accidentally got added to a list where it had no business being. But what could I possibly say that would compete with promises of limos and after-parties at beach houses and helicopter rides and tables at Michelin-starred restaurants? What did I have to offer? A ride in my mom's Honda Civic with the check engine light that had been on for 6 months? Dinner at the Olive Garden where I had a gift card? "Come on, Joshua, shoot your shot," my best friend Harris said, his voice cutting through my spiral of self-doubt as he pulled out the chair next to me and leaned over to read over my shoulder, his own homework clearly abandoned in favor of watching this disaster unfold in real time. He'd been in the middle of writing an English essay about the Great Gatsby, but apparently my humiliation was more interesting than the American dream. "She doesn't even know who I am," I said, not looking up from my phone, watching as more messages rolled in, each guy trying to outdo the last, posting photos of their cars, their acceptance letters to Princeton and Yale and Stanford, their professional headshots that looked like they belonged in a modeling portfolio. "Then why are you in the group?" Harris asked, which was exactly the question that had been screaming in my head since the moment I saw the notification. That was the question, wasn't it? The million-dollar question. I checked my contacts, scrolling through the A's until I found her name, or rather, didn't find it. We weren't even friends on Snapchat. We'd never exchanged numbers. I didn't follow her on Instagram and she didn't follow me. How did she even get my username? How did she know I existed enough to add me to this group? The chat kept exploding like a fireworks show that wouldn't end. Message after message lighting up my screen. Photos started appearing now, guys posting their best angles, carefully curated shots that looked like they'd been planned and filtered and approved by a committee. Their cars gleaming in driveways, their acceptance letters to prestigious colleges casually displayed like they just happened to have them nearby, their athletic achievements and academic awards and everything that made them worthy of consideration. Amelia responded to each one with fire emojis and maybe and interesting and OMG that's so sweet, giving everyone just enough encouragement to keep them hooked, playing them all like a master fisherman with multiple lines in the water. I typed, "Hey, I think I might be added by mistake. Read it. Hated it. Delete. Too pathetic. Too willing to give up before even trying." I typed, "I'd love to take you. Read it. Hated it more. Delete. Too forward. Too presumptuous. Like I actually thought I had a chance." I typed, "This is Joshua from your AP history class. Read it. Wanted to throw my phone across the library. Delete." Like she needed a reminder of which Joshua I was. Like there were so many Joshuas in her life that she needed help keeping track. 20 minutes passed while I sat there, frozen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard like a pianist who'd forgotten the music. 30 minutes. The suggestions got more elaborate with each passing minute, escalating into absurdity. Someone offered a helicopter ride to prom, complete with a photo of him standing next to what might have been his family's private helicopter, or might have been photoshopped. I honestly couldn't tell. Another guy said his dad could get them a table at Per Se, the impossible-to-book restaurant downtown that had a 3-month waiting list and cost more per person than my car insurance for a month. "Just send something," Harris urged, poking me in the shoulder like that would somehow give me courage, like physical contact could transfer his natural confidence into my anxiety-riddled body. What's the worst that could happen? The worst? I could think of about 50 scenarios, each more horrifying than the last. Public humiliation in front of every popular senior guy at school, becoming a meme, having "I'm interested" screenshot and posted on every social media platform with laughing emojis, being known for the rest of senior year as that guy who thought he had a shot with Amelia Bauer, the delusional nobody who couldn't read social cues. But Harris was right, even though I didn't want to admit it. I'd spent 3 years being invisible to her, 3 years of watching her from afar like some kind of creepy stalker, 3 years of imagining conversations we'd never have and scenarios that would never play out. What did I have to lose that I hadn't already lost by being too scared to try? I typed, "I'm interested," and hit send before I could stop myself, before my brain could override my fingers, before common sense could prevail and save me from myself. The chat went silent, no new messages for a full minute, which in group chat time felt like an eternity, like the whole world had stopped spinning and everyone was collectively holding their breath. Then, 2 minutes. My message sat there, naked and alone and pathetic, without even an emoji to soften it or make it seem casual. Just 2 words that somehow managed to convey exactly how inadequate I was. I watched everyone's bitmojis pop up in the chat, those little cartoon avatars that showed who was actively reading, and my stomach dropped further with each one. Mason saw it. Arthur saw it. Wade saw it. They all saw it. All 15 guys who were infinitely more qualified than me to take the most popular girl in school to prom. "Who's Joshua?" Wade asked, and I nearly threw my phone in the trash can next to my table, nearly deleted Snapchat entirely, nearly transferred schools or moved to another country or faked my own death. They didn't even know who I was. I was so invisible that even in a group chat where my name was literally listed, they didn't know who I was. "Nobody," Mason responded, and that single word felt like a knife sliding between my ribs. Must be a glitch. A glitch. Not even a person. Just an error in the system. Amelia finally typed something after what felt like hours, but was probably only another minute or two. Interesting responses, guys. Let me think about it." And then nothing. She left me on read. I could see the little opened indicator next to my message, while continuing to respond to others with flirty comments and inside jokes I didn't understand. References to things that had happened at parties I'd never attended and conversations I'd never been part of. I wanted to leave the group, to tap that leave conversation button and pretend this never happened, to erase this moment from existence, but that would make it worse. So much worse. Everyone would see Joshua left the group pop up in the chat and know I'd given up, know that I couldn't handle the rejection, couldn't even stay in a group chat without running away with my tail between my legs. An hour passed, the longest hour of my life. longer than any calculus class or DMV visit or family dinner where my relatives asked about my college plans. The chat slowed down as guys went to basketball practice or work, or whatever popular people did with their afternoons. I stayed in the library, sitting in that same spot by the window, staring at my phone until my eyes burned, wondering if I should apologize for intruding on their conversation, for daring to think I belonged in the same group as Mason and Arthur and Wade and all the other guys who fit into Amelia's world in a way I never could. Then a private message notification appeared at the top of my screen, a little banner that made my heart stop completely. From Amelia. The phone suddenly felt heavy in my hands, like it weighed 50 pounds instead of a few ounces. My hands shook as I opened it, my finger slipping on the screen twice before I managed to tap it. My breath caught somewhere in my throat. Finally! I've been waiting for you to message me for 3 years, Joshua. I stared at the screen, reading the words over and over. Sure, I was misreading them. Sure, this was some kind of autocorrect error or a message meant for someone else. My brain refusing to process what my eyes were seeing. Another message. Do you know how many times I've tried to start conversations with you? How many times I've walked past your lunch table hoping you'd say hi? Then another. I literally created this whole group chat thing just to have an excuse to talk to you. Added all those other guys, so it wouldn't be obvious. My entire understanding of reality shifted like someone had tilted the axis of the earth. Wait, what? I typed back, my fingers fumbling over the keys, making typos I had to correct twice. I've liked you since freshman year when you helped me with that history project, but you never seemed interested. You never even looked at me. Freshman year, the history project. I remembered it suddenly. We'd been assigned as partners for a presentation on the Cold War, and I'd been so nervous I could barely speak, but I'd done most of the research because I was too anxious to contribute any other way, and she'd seemed grateful, but I'd assumed it was just politeness, just her being nice to the weird, quiet kid she got stuck with. I look at you all the time. I just didn't think you knew I existed, I typed, the truth spilling out easier through a screen than it ever could have in person. God, we're both idiots, aren't we? So, is that a yes to prom? That's definitely a yes. Good. Now leave that group chat. I'm deleting it. This was exhausting pretending to care about Mason's limo. Update. I sat there staring at those messages for what felt like forever, reading them over and over again like if I blinked, they might disappear or change into something that made sense with my understanding of the universe. My hands were still shaking when I typed back, asking if she was being serious, if this was some kind of joke or prank that I wasn't getting, because my brain couldn't process how Amelia had liked me this whole time while I'd been convinced I was invisible to her. Her response came back instantly, the little typing bubble appearing and disappearing in like 2 seconds flat. 100% serious? I've been waiting forever for you to notice me. I read it 3 more times, my heart doing this weird thing where it felt too big for my chest. And then I shoved my phone in Harris's face so hard I almost hit his nose with it. He grabbed it from my hands and his eyes went huge as he read through the messages, getting bigger with each line, and then he literally jumped out of his chair, making this weird, excited noise that was half laugh and half yell. Everyone in the quiet section turned to look at us, and Freya Nelson, the librarian, appeared out of nowhere, like she had some kind of noise detection radar, her finger already pressed to her lips in that universal shushing gesture. Harris sat back down, but he was bouncing in his seat like a little kid who just got told they're going to Disneyland, grabbing my arm, and shaking it while whispering way too loud about how he knew it. He knew something was up with that group chat. Freya walked over to our table with her arms crossed, looking at us over her glasses in that way librarians do when they're deciding whether to kick you out or just give you a warning. Harris apologized, but he couldn't stop grinning, and then he started going on about how we needed to plan the perfect prom proposal, even though Amelia had already said yes. Because apparently that's what people do. They make these big public gestures with signs and flowers and stuff. I told him she already said yes twice. That seemed like enough, but he insisted that didn't count, because it was over text, and everyone knows text doesn't count for major life events. I pulled my phone back and opened the group chat one more time, looking at all those messages from Mason and Arthur and Wade and everyone else, all their confident offers and expensive promises sitting there like evidence of a world I didn't belong in. Amelia had told me to leave the chat, said she was deleting it, that she was exhausted from pretending to care about Mason's limo. I tapped the little settings icon and hit the leave conversation button, and the chat disappeared from my screen like it had never existed. Within seconds, my phone buzzed with a notification, and I couldn't help checking to see what happened after I left. Mason had posted, "Guess he couldn't handle the competition," followed by 3 laughing emojis and that crying, laughing face that people use when they think something is hilarious. But I didn't care, not even a little bit, because I had private messages from Amelia asking when we could actually talk in person, asking if I was free after school, asking if the coffee shop near campus worked for me. I typed back yes before I could overthink it, and we agreed to meet there at 3:30 after classes ended. The bell rang for fifth period, and I somehow made it to English and then calculus, but I have zero memory of what happened in either class, because my brain was stuck on repeat, playing the same thoughts over and over. The last 2 periods of the day dragged on forever, each minute feeling like an hour, and I spent the entire time in calculus, staring at my blank worksheet with this stupid smile on my face instead of solving derivatives. Cason Phillips walked by my desk during independent work time and stopped, looking down at my completely empty paper and then at my face. He asked if I was feeling okay, if I needed to go to the nurse or something, because apparently I looked weird. I told him I was fine, just having a good day, and he gave me this knowing look like he understood something I didn't, and walked away, shaking his head. When the final bell rang, I practically ran to my locker, grabbed my backpack, and headed to the coffee shop 3 blocks from the school. My hands were sweating, and I kept wiping them on my jeans, trying to calm down and act normal, even though nothing about this situation was normal. The coffee shop was this small place with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls that always smelled like espresso and cinnamon, where I'd spent countless afternoons doing homework alone at a corner table. When I walked in, Amelia was already there, sitting at a table by the window, and she waved me over with this bright smile that made my stomach flip. I walked across the coffee shop feeling like everyone was watching me, even though probably nobody cared, and sat down across from her in the empty chair she'd saved. Being this close to her in real life, having an actual conversation instead of watching her from across the cafeteria or passing her in the hallway, felt completely unreal and scary and amazing all at the same time. She had this purple notebook in front of her and a half-finished iced coffee, and she was playing with the straw wrapper, folding it into tiny squares. She started talking right away, like she'd been holding all these words in for years, and they were finally spilling out. She told me the whole story about how she noticed me freshman year, when we got paired up for that history project about the Cold War, how I'd stayed after school 3 different times to help her understand the timeline and all the different events. I remembered those afternoons in the library, how nervous I'd been, how I'd done most of the research, because I was too anxious to do anything else useful. I'd assumed she thought I was just the nerdy kid doing all the work, because she was too busy with her popular friends to care about the assignment. But she said she was impressed by how patient I was, how I explained everything clearly without making her feel stupid, how I actually listened when she asked questions instead of just talking at her like most people did. She said that's when she started paying attention to me, noticing me in the hallways and in classes we shared, trying to figure out how to talk to me again after the project ended. Amelia admitted she'd tried multiple times over the past 3 years to start conversations with me, that she'd walked past my lunch table in the computer lab at least a dozen times, hoping I'd look up and say hi, that she'd tried to catch my eye in the hallway between classes. I felt my face getting hot as I realized what she was saying, because I had seen her walking by. I had noticed her in the hallways, but I'd always looked away or left quickly, because I was so convinced she didn't know I existed that I never considered she might actually want to talk to me. I'd literally run away from opportunities to connect with her because I was too scared and too sure that a girl like her wouldn't be interested in a guy like me. She laughed when I admitted this, but it wasn't a mean laugh. It was more like she couldn't believe we'd both been this stupid for so long. Then she explained that Brooklyn Ryan, her best friend, had helped her come up with the group chat idea after Amelia spent most of junior year complaining about how I wouldn't notice her no matter what she did. Brooklyn had suggested creating a situation where I'd have to respond, where I couldn't just look away or leave, and the prom invitation group chat with all those other guys was the plan they'd come up with. The whole thing with Mason and Arthur and Wade and everyone else was just an act, just a way to make it seem less obvious that she was really trying to get my attention specifically. We sat there talking for 2 hours about everything, and the conversation flowed so easily, it didn't feel like 2 hours at all. She told me about her college plans, how she was applying to study environmental science because she wanted to work with conservation programs, and I learned she volunteers at an animal shelter every weekend, which nobody at the school ever talks about because I guess it doesn't fit with the popular girl image everyone has of her. We talked about our favorite movies and discovered we both love weird indie films that nobody else has heard of, and we both hate pep rallies for the same reason, which is that they're loud and pointless, and we'd both rather be literally anywhere else. She asked about my coding projects, and actually seemed interested, asking real questions instead of just nodding politely, and I found myself explaining things without feeling like I was boring her. When I finally checked my phone, it was almost 6, and I had 3 missed calls from my mom wondering where I was. I said goodbye to Amelia outside the coffee shop, both of us standing there awkwardly for a second before she hugged me, and then I walked home in this weird daze where everything looked different somehow, like the whole world had shifted slightly. When I got home, my mom was in the kitchen making dinner, and she immediately noticed something was different, asking what happened, because apparently I was walking around grinning at nothing like some kind of crazy person. I told her about Amelia and the group chat and prom, and she got more excited than I'd ever seen her, immediately pulling out her phone to look up tuxedo rental places, and asking about dinner reservations and whether we needed to coordinate with other couples. I spent the entire evening texting with Amelia, these long conversations about everything from our favorite songs to what we wanted to study in college. And every time my phone buzzed, I felt this jolt of energy, like I'd touched an electric fence in the good way, if that makes any sense. My mom kept walking past my bedroom door with this huge smile on her face, occasionally poking her head in to ask if I wanted snacks or if I was okay. And I knew she was just excited to see me this happy, but it was also kind of embarrassing having her hover like that. I barely slept that night because my brain wouldn't shut off, kept replaying the coffee shop conversation and reading through our text messages, and thinking about how tomorrow at the school everything would be different, how people would see me with Amelia and know that somehow, impossibly, she'd chosen me over Mason and Arthur and Wade and everyone else. The next morning I got to the school early, way earlier than usual, and headed straight to the computer lab where I always ate lunch, setting my backpack down at my usual table in the corner near the server closet where the Wi-Fi was strongest. I pulled out my phone to text Amelia, but she'd already sent me a message asking where I usually sat for lunch, and when I told her the computer lab, she responded with a smiley face and said she'd see me there. Lunch period started, and I sat there eating the sandwich my mom had packed, trying to focus on the coding project I'd been working on for weeks, this program that could sort through data files and organize them automatically, but my eyes kept flicking to the door every few seconds. Then Amelia walked in carrying her lunch bag and her purple notebook, scanning the room until she spotted me, and she waved and headed straight to my table like it was the most natural thing in the world. She pulled out the chair across from me and sat down, asking what I was working on, and I started explaining the program while she unpacked her lunch, nodding along like she actually understood what I was talking about, even though it was pretty technical stuff. About 10 minutes later, Mason and Wade walked past the computer lab, probably on their way to the cafeteria, and they both stopped dead when they saw Amelia sitting at my table. Mason's face did this thing where his eyebrows went up and his mouth opened slightly, like he'd just witnessed something that broke the laws of physics. And Wade actually backed up a step to look through the doorway again, like he needed to confirm what he was seeing. Amelia noticed them staring and just gave them this casual wave, totally relaxed, like there was nothing weird about the most popular girl in the school eating lunch in the computer lab with the guy who'd been called a glitch just yesterday. They stood there for another few seconds before Mason shook his head and they kept walking, and I heard Wade say something that sounded like a question, but I couldn't make out the words. Harris showed up maybe 5 minutes after that, his usual lunch period routine of hitting the vending machines first for chips and a soda, and when he walked in and saw Amelia at our table, his entire face lit up like someone had just told him Christmas was happening twice this year. He practically ran over, dropping his backpack on the floor and pulling out the third chair at our little table, immediately launching into this story about the time in 7th grade, when I tried to impress a girl by doing a backflip off the monkey bars and landed flat on my back, knocking the wind out of myself so hard I couldn't breathe for like 30 seconds. I felt my face getting hot as he told the story, adding all these embarrassing details about how I'd laid there gasping like a fish, while the girl and her friends just stared at me. But Amelia was laughing in this way that didn't feel mean at all, more like she was laughing with me than at me. She jumped in with her own story about 8th grade when she had braces and glasses and tried out for the volleyball team, even though she'd never played before. And during tryouts, she went to spike the ball and completely missed, falling forward and sliding across the gym floor on her stomach while everyone watched. Harris loved that story and kept asking for more details, and soon they were trading embarrassing middle school moments like old friends, and I realized this was actually going pretty well, that Amelia fit into this space that had always just been mine and Harris's. The next day, Brooklyn showed up at our lunch table, approaching slowly like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to be there, holding her lunch tray and looking between me and Amelia. She asked if she could sit down, saying she was curious about the guy Amelia hadn't stopped talking about for the past 3 years, and Amelia rolled her eyes, but she was smiling when she told Brooklyn to sit. Brooklyn settled into the 4th chair at our table and immediately started asking me questions about my coding projects. Real questions that showed she was actually listening to the answers, not just being polite. She wanted to know if I'd ever built a website, if I knew how to hack into school systems, if I could help her fix her laptop that kept freezing randomly. And I found myself explaining technical stuff in a way that made sense to someone who wasn't a computer person. Over the next week, more of Amelia's friends started showing up at the computer lab during lunch, not all at once, but gradually, 1 or 2 new people each day, until our little corner table had expanded to include chairs pulled over from other tables. I learned that Brooklyn was actually really into video games, that another girl named Sarah knew more about Marvel movies than I did, that a guy named Vidal was teaching himself guitar using YouTube videos and wanted advice on the best tutorial channels. They were just regular people who happened to be more social than me, who knew how to talk to strangers and didn't get anxious in crowds, but they weren't the intimidating popular kids I'd built them up to be in my head. They asked genuine questions about things I knew about, listened when I explained stuff, included me in conversations about movies and music and weekend plans. On Thursday, Arthur stopped me in the hallway between third and fourth period, stepping out of the flow of students moving between classes to catch my attention. He looked uncomfortable, shifting his weight from one foot to the other, and then he said he wanted to apologize for calling me nobody in the group chat, that he didn't actually mean it, and was just trying to show off in front of everyone. I stood there for a second, not sure what to say, because part of me was still hurt by that comment, but holding on to anger seemed stupid now that everything had worked out so well. I told him it was fine, that I got it, and he looked relieved, and said he'd see me around before heading to his next class. That weekend, Duke came home from college for spring break, showing up at Harris's house on Saturday morning, while Harris and I were playing video games in his basement. Duke was 2 years older than us, already done with his freshman year at State, and he had this confident way of moving through the world that came from being away from home and figuring things out on his own. He sat down on the couch next to us and asked about prom, and when we told him I was taking Amelia, he got this knowing look on his face and started giving advice. He said the key was making Amelia feel special, without trying too hard to impress her friends, that girls could tell. When you were being fake or putting on a show, that the best thing I could do was just be myself and focus on making her happy. He told us about his own prom 2 years ago, how he'd stressed about everything being perfect, and it ended up being kind of a disaster because he was so focused on following some plan instead of just enjoying the night. I listened to all of this while Harris paused the game, and it actually made me feel better about the whole thing, less pressure to compete with Mason's limo or Wade's beach house party. The following Saturday, I took Amelia to the art museum downtown, something I'd wanted to do for years, but never had anyone to go with who would actually enjoy it. We spent the first hour in the classical section looking at paintings from the Renaissance, Amelia pointing out details in the backgrounds that I'd never noticed before, and then we moved to the contemporary section where all the weird modern stuff was displayed. There was this one sculpture that looked like someone had taken old rotary telephones and melted them together into this twisted mass of plastic and metal, and we stood in front of it for probably 20 minutes, just discussing what we thought it meant. Amelia said it was about how communication technology had become this tangled mess that connected everyone, but also made everything more complicated, and I thought it was more about nostalgia for simpler times when phones were just phones and not these devices that controlled our entire lives. We never agreed on an interpretation, but that was fine. The discussion itself was fun, and I liked hearing how her brain worked through things. On Monday at the school, I was walking past the cafeteria during free period when I heard these girls from Amelia's usual crowd talking, their voices carrying through the open doorway. One of them was asking why Amelia was dating me instead of someone like Mason, saying it didn't make sense, that Mason was going to UCLA and had his life together. Before I could decide whether to keep walking or say something, Amelia's voice cut through, sharp and clear, telling them she liked people who were genuine over people who were just popular, that being able to throw a ball or give a good speech didn't make someone a good person. The conversation stopped after that, and I kept walking, feeling this warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with embarrassment and everything to do with the fact that Amelia had defended me without even knowing I was there to hear it. Harris and I went tuxedo shopping the next weekend with Duke, who insisted we go to an actual suit store instead of the cheap rental place at the mall. My mom had given me money she'd been saving, telling me she wanted me to look good for prom, to feel confident, and I ended up with a navy suit that actually fit properly instead of hanging off me like borrowed clothes. Duke helped me pick out a tie that matched the color of Amelia's dress, which Brooklyn had secretly told me about through text messages. And when I tried the whole outfit on and looked in the mirror, I actually felt good about how I looked for maybe the first time in my life. Amelia and I started studying together for AP exams, meeting at the library after school 3 days a week to quiz each other and review notes. And I discovered she was actually better at chemistry than I was, explaining molecular bonds and reaction equations in ways that finally made sense to my brain, while I helped her work through calculus problems, showing her the shortcuts and patterns that made derivatives and integrals easier to solve. We made a good team, trading knowledge back and forth, and we started making up these ridiculous memory tricks to help us remember formulas and dates, like turning the quadratic formula into a rap or creating a story about historical figures having a dinner party to remember the order of events. The studying was actually fun instead of stressful, and I found myself looking forward to those library sessions as much as our actual dates, just being around her and watching how her mind worked through problems. 3 weeks before prom, I woke up one morning and realized we'd been dating for almost 2 months, but I'd never actually done a formal prom proposal. We were obviously going together. We'd talked about it constantly and made plans and coordinated outfits, but I'd never done the big gesture thing with signs or flowers or any of that stuff people post videos of online. I mentioned this to Harris at lunch, and he looked at me like I'd just told him I forgot how to breathe. He insisted this was completely unacceptable, that Amelia deserved a real proposal even if she'd already said yes twice, that everyone does the big public thing now, and it would be weird if I didn't. I tried to argue that it seemed pointless since we were already going together, but Harris wouldn't let it go. He pulled out his phone and started showing me videos of elaborate prom proposals, guys spelling things out with candles or hiring flash mobs or renting billboards. I told him there was no way I was doing anything that crazy, and he agreed, but said I needed to do something memorable, something that felt personal to us, instead of generic. We spent the rest of lunch period brainstorming ideas, and most of them were terrible. Harris suggested I code something into the school website, but that seemed like it would get me suspended. I thought about doing something in the cafeteria, but the idea of that many people watching made me want to throw up. Then Harris mentioned the library, the place where everything started with that group chat notification, and suddenly, I knew exactly what to do. After school, I went to find Freya Nelson, the librarian. She was shelving books in the reference section and looked up when I approached. I explained what I wanted to do and asked if it would be okay to set up a display in the big window that faced the hallway during Amelia's free period next week. Freya smiled and said she thought it was sweet, that she'd noticed us studying together and was happy to help. She told me I could come in early that morning to set it up, and she'd make sure nobody disturbed it before Amelia saw it. I spent the next week planning everything out, making lists and checking them twice like some kind of obsessed person. I needed books that would spell out the word prom with a question mark, and they had to be thick enough to stand upright in the window and visible from the hallway. I went to the library every day after school and searched through shelves looking for the perfect books. For the P, I found this huge dictionary that was almost 6 inches thick. For the R, I grabbed an atlas that showed every country in the world. For the O, I found a circular cookbook that was shaped perfectly. For the M, I used a massive medical textbook that weighed about 10 pounds. The question mark was harder, but I finally found a book about punctuation that had a giant question mark on the cover. I practiced setting them up at home using books from my room, arranging them and rearranging them until I could do it quickly, and they looked right. Harris came over on Tuesday night to help me rehearse, and he timed me with his phone. 3 minutes to set up all 5 books, plus a small bouquet of flowers I was going to put next to them. On Thursday morning, I got to the school an hour early with my backpack full of books. Freya let me into the library and I worked fast, setting up each book in the window exactly like I'd practiced. The morning light came through the glass and made the display look even better than I'd imagined. I added the flowers at the end, these purple ones that matched Amelia's favorite color. Freya stood back and looked at it and told me it was perfect, that any girl would be lucky to get a proposal like this. I thanked her and left before I could start overthinking everything and mess with the arrangement. During third period, Harris sent Amelia a text telling her to check out something cool in the library window. I was in calculus at the time and I couldn't focus on anything. My leg bounced under the desk, and I kept checking my phone even though I knew she wouldn't text back immediately. 20 minutes into class, my phone buzzed with a message from Amelia asking if I was behind the library window display. I typed back yes and asked if she liked it. She responded with about 15 heart emojis and said she was on her way to find me. I asked Cason Phillips if I could use the bathroom, and he nodded without looking up from his desk. I walked to the library as fast as I could without actually running. Amelia was standing in front of the window when I got there, looking at the books and the flowers. She turned around when she heard me coming, and her smile was so big it made my whole nervous week of planning feel worth it. She walked over, and I asked her officially if she would go to prom with me. She said yes, obviously, and then she kissed me right there in the hallway outside the library. Freya appeared in the doorway and shushed us, but she was smiling when she did it. I noticed several students had their phones out recording the whole thing, and normally that would have made me anxious, but I didn't care at all. We went back into the library, and Amelia took photos of the book display from every angle. She posted one on her Instagram with a caption about the most creative proposal ever, and within an hour it had over 200 likes. Harris found me after fourth period and asked how it went. I showed him Amelia's Instagram post, and he punched my shoulder in that way guys do when they're happy for you. Prom planning took over the next few weeks and turned into this massive group project. Brooklyn created a group chat with me and Amelia and 6 other people who were all going together. They discussed dinner reservations at different restaurants downtown, compared prices and menus and travel times. Someone suggested we all go in one big limo, but that got voted down because it would be too expensive to split. We settled on meeting at the restaurant and carpooling from there to the actual prom venue. The group chat filled up with hundreds of messages about dress colors and boutonniere options and after-party plans. I got added to 3 more group chats related to prom, one for just the guys coordinating tuxedo pickup times, one for organizing photos before dinner, and one for planning the after-party at Wade's beach house. I went from being in basically 0 group chats to being in 6 of them, and my phone never stopped buzzing. Brooklyn sent me private messages about Amelia's dress color and style so I could coordinate my tie and boutonniere. She showed me photos of the dress from different angles and made me promise not to tell Amelia she'd shared them. The dress was this deep purple color that looked almost blue in certain light. Brooklyn told me where to buy flowers that would match and sent me links to specific florists. On Saturday, Amelia came over to my house to work on a history project we had due the following week. My mom opened the door when she rang the bell, and I heard them talking in the entryway. When I came downstairs, my mom was already asking Amelia about her college plans and what she wanted to study. They moved into the kitchen, and I followed them. My mom offered Amelia something to drink, and they started talking about some reality TV show they both watched. I stood there listening to them discuss the latest episode and all the drama between the contestants. Amelia knew every detail, and so did my mom. They went back and forth about who was fake and who was genuine and what would happen in next week's episode. I had no idea my mom even watched that show. After about 20 minutes of this, I reminded them we had a project to work on. We went up to my room and spread our notes across my desk. We worked for maybe an hour before my mom called us down for dinner. Amelia stayed and ate with us. My dad came home from work halfway through the meal, and my mom introduced them. My dad asked Amelia about school and her family and her plans after graduation. She answered all his questions easily and made jokes that actually made my dad laugh. My little sister came home from her friend's house and joined us at the table. She stared at Amelia the whole time like she was some kind of celebrity. After dinner, Amelia helped my mom clear the dishes, even though my mom told her she didn't have to. They stood at the sink together washing and drying and talking about another reality show. When Amelia finally left around 8, my mom pulled me aside and told me she really liked her, that she fit into our family naturally. On Monday at lunch, Wade walked up to our table in the computer lab. He stood there for a second looking uncomfortable before he asked if he could talk to me privately. I followed him out into the hallway. He apologized for calling me nobody in the group chat and for being dismissive. He said he was just showing off and didn't actually mean it. Then he invited me to his pre-prom party at his beach house. He said Amelia was already invited, obviously, and he wanted to make sure I knew I was welcome too. I didn't know what to say at first, because part of me was still suspicious that this was some kind of setup. Wade seemed to notice my hesitation and told me the party would be chill, just people hanging out before prom, nothing crazy. I said I'd think about it, and he nodded and walked away. When I got back to the table, I told Amelia about the invitation. She confirmed that Wade was being genuine, that his parties were actually fun despite their reputation. She said we should definitely go because it would be a good way to hang out with everyone before the actual prom. I agreed, even though the idea of going to Wade's beach house still felt surreal. The following weekend, Brooklyn sent me the address of a flower shop downtown. I took the bus there on Saturday morning. The shop was small and smelled overwhelmingly like roses and lilies. A woman behind the counter asked if she could help me. I explained that I needed a corsage for prom that would match a specific purple dress. I showed her the photos Brooklyn had sent me. The woman looked at them carefully and then led me to a display case full of sample corsages. She pointed out several options that would work with the dress color. We settled on one with purple roses and white accent flowers. She asked when I needed it, and I told her the date. She wrote down my information and said it would be ready for pickup the day before prom. The total cost was more than I expected, but I had money saved from my birthday and some odd jobs I'd done for neighbors. I paid and left, feeling accomplished. The week before prom, Cason Phillips asked me to stay after calculus class. I thought maybe I'd done something wrong or failed a test. Instead, he told me he'd noticed positive changes in my confidence and participation over the past few months. He said I was volunteering answers more often and seemed more engaged with the material. Then he said, "Sometimes the right person brings out the best version of yourself." I thanked him and left feeling weird, but also kind of good about what he'd said. I'd never thought of myself as someone whose confidence could change that noticeably. Prom night finally arrived after weeks of planning and group chats and coordination. I picked up the corsage from the flower shop in the morning. My mom helped me get ready, fixing my tie 3 times until it looked right. She took about 50 photos of me in my navy suit standing in our living room. I drove to Amelia's house in my mom's car. The check engine light was still on, but I'd gotten the car washed and cleaned out all the trash and old water bottles. I parked in her driveway and walked up to the front door. My hands were shaking slightly when I rang the bell. Amelia's mom answered and invited me inside. Amelia came down the stairs a minute later wearing the purple dress I'd seen in Brooklyn's photos. It looked even better in person. She'd done something different with her hair and was wearing more makeup than usual. I stood there staring at her until Harris texted me asking if I was okay. I pulled out the corsage box and opened it. My hands shook as I tried to pin it on her dress. She held still and smiled at me while I fumbled with the pin. Her mom took photos of us together in front of their fireplace. We drove downtown to the Italian restaurant where we were meeting everyone else. The dinner reservation was for 6:30. We got there 15 minutes early and waited in the parking lot. Brooklyn and her date showed up next. Then Wade with his girlfriend, then 4 other couples from our group chats. We all went inside together, and the hostess led us to a long table they'd set up for our group. The restaurant had white tablecloths and candles on every table, and soft music playing overhead. I sat next to Amelia and across from Harris, who'd brought Brooklyn as his date after they'd started talking at the last party. The waiter brought menus and took our drink orders. Everyone talked and laughed and passed breadsticks around the table. I ordered chicken parmesan, and Amelia got fettuccine alfredo. The food came out hot and perfectly cooked. We talked about summer plans and college visits, and who was going where in the fall. Amelia mentioned wanting me to meet her parents officially soon, not just the quick introduction from prom photos. She said her dad wanted to take us both out to dinner sometime. The conversation flowed easily, without any of the awkward silences I'd feared. Brooklyn told stories about her disastrous chemistry final, and Wade talked about his plans to study business at State. Harris made everyone laugh with an impression of our English teacher. I looked around the table at all these people who a few months ago I'd never imagined being friends with, and realized how much had changed since that Snapchat notification. Thinking phase. I need to analyze the continuation requirements carefully. 1. Reddit authenticity. The previous content ends with dinner at the Italian restaurant, establishing a warm, conversational tone. I need to maintain this casual, first-person recounting style while covering beats 31 to 40. 2. Content distribution. 97% action-driven, 3% reflection, max 5% dialogue. The beats involve prom night, after party, beach walk, final month of school, college acceptance, and graduation. I need to focus on what happens, rather than internal processing. 3. Seamless continuation. Previous content ends with, and realized how much had changed since that Snapchat notification. This is a complete sentence, so I can start fresh with the next scene transition to prom night. Beat 31. 4. Plot progression. Beats 31 to 40 cover. Beat 31, prom dancing. Beat 32, Mason's congratulations. Beat 33, Brooklyn and Harris dancing. Beat 34, Wade's beach house party. Beat 35, beach walk at midnight. Beat 36, staying until sunrise. Beat 37, last month of senior year. Beat 38, college acceptances. Beat 39, graduation dinner. Beat 40, final reflection, heading to college 5. Narrative momentum. These beats represent the culmination and resolution of the story. I need to maintain forward momentum while showing the transformation Joshua has undergone, but without creating a false ending since this is the actual conclusion. Beat 40 is the final beat. Location continuity, check. Previous content was at the Italian restaurant. Beat 31 transitions to the prom venue, which is a natural progression after dinner. Character usage. I can only use established characters. Joshua, Amelia, Harris, Mason, Arthur, Wade, Brooklyn, Kaysen, Duke, Freya, and family members already mentioned. Word count target. 1,200 to 1,600 words for 10 beats equals 120 to 160 words per beat average. Cliché avoidance. Must avoid phrases like heart skipped a beat, butterflies in stomach, time stood still, etc. Sentence length. Maximum 25 to 30 words per sentence. Proper breaks between thoughts. No em dashes. Use commas, periods, or parentheses instead. After dinner, we drove to the prom venue, this hotel ballroom downtown with chandeliers hanging from the ceiling and purple lighting that made everything look slightly unreal. The place was already packed when we walked in, music pumping through speakers so loud I could feel the bass in my chest. Amelia grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the dance floor before I could overthink it or find excuses to stand against the wall like I usually did at the school events. The DJ was playing some pop song I recognized from the radio, and people were jumping around in groups, their formal clothes looking weird combined with the chaotic dancing. I started moving awkwardly, trying to copy what other people were doing, but Amelia just laughed and kept dancing without caring what anyone thought. A slow song came on after maybe 3 songs, and she stepped closer, putting her arms around my neck. I put my hands on her waist like I'd seen in movies, and we swayed back and forth. It wasn't complicated or fancy, but it felt right, just moving together without worrying about looking stupid. Another fast song started, and she pulled me deeper into the crowd, right into the middle of the dance floor where everyone could see us. The song was one I actually knew from my Spotify playlist, and suddenly I wasn't thinking about my movements or who was watching. I just moved to the music, and Amelia matched my energy, both of us laughing when I did something particularly ridiculous with my arms. Mason walked over during a break when we stepped aside to grab water from the refreshment table. He looked uncomfortable for a second, shifting his weight between his feet the way people do when they're about to say something difficult. He told us we looked good together, and then admitted he'd been kind of a jerk in that group chat, that he was just showing off and didn't mean the things he said. I told him it was fine, that everything worked out anyway. He mentioned UCLA and how he was focused on basketball and getting ready for college now. That high school drama didn't matter as much anymore when you knew you were leaving in a few months. We talked for maybe 5 minutes about his scholarship and his plans before he headed back to his date. Across the dance floor, I spotted Harris and Brooklyn dancing together, which surprised me because Harris had never mentioned being interested in her. They looked happy, though, both of them smiling and talking between songs. Harris caught my eye and gave me a huge thumbs up, grinning like an idiot. I realized my best friend might actually have his own prom story happening right now, something that started because I'd finally talked to Amelia and brought everyone together. The DJ announced the last song of the night around 11, and everyone crowded onto the dance floor for one final slow dance. Amelia rested her head on my shoulder, and we barely moved, just stood there swaying slightly while the music played. After prom ended, we all drove to Wade's beach house in a caravan of cars, following his Jeep through town, and then onto the highway heading toward the coast. I'd been nervous about this part all week, worried that Wade's legendary parties would be too much for me, too loud and chaotic and full of people doing things I wasn't comfortable with. But when we got there, it was just people hanging out on the back deck overlooking the ocean, playing card games and talking in small groups. Someone had ordered pizza, and there were coolers full of soda and water. Wade's parents were home, staying inside but clearly aware of what was happening, which made everything feel safer and more relaxed. I sat on a deck chair with Amelia, and we played a card game with 6 other people, laughing when someone made a stupid play or forgot whose turn it was. Brooklyn and Harris sat together on a bench near the railing, talking quietly and occasionally joining in the game. The whole thing felt normal and fun instead of intimidating, just friends hanging out after a big event. Around midnight, Amelia and I walked down the stairs from the deck to the beach, leaving our shoes at the bottom step. The sand was cool under my feet, and the ocean was this huge, dark presence making constant noise. We walked along the waterline where the sand was wet and firm, talking about how strange it was that we'd both liked each other for 3 years without knowing. She admitted she almost gave up on trying to get my attention before Brooklyn suggested the group chat idea, that she'd been ready to just move on and forget about the quiet guy from history class. I told her about all the times I'd watched her in the cafeteria, how I'd memorized her schedule without meaning to, how I'd practiced conversations in my head that I never had the courage to start. We kept walking until the party noise faded behind us, and it was just the sound of waves and our voices. She asked me about college plans and whether I was scared about leaving home and starting over somewhere new. I said I was nervous but also excited, that having her made the whole thing less terrifying. We found a spot where someone had left an old beach blanket and sat down facing the water. The conversation shifted to easier topics, favorite movies and music, and stupid things we remembered from elementary school. She told me about her family's weird traditions, and I shared stories about my relatives and their ridiculous expectations. Time passed without me noticing, minutes turning into hours while we talked about everything and nothing. The sky started getting lighter around 5 in the morning, this gradual shift from black to dark blue to pale orange. Amelia leaned against my shoulder and got quiet, her breathing slowing down until I realized she'd fallen asleep. I sat there watching the sunrise happen in stages, the colors spreading across the sky and reflecting off the water. 3 months ago, I couldn't say 2 words to her without mumbling or looking away. Now she was asleep on my shoulder on a beach at sunrise after prom. The last month of senior year felt completely different from every other month I'd spent at that school. I got invited to group hangouts at the mall and movie nights at people's houses. My name appeared on graduation party invitation lists. People I'd never talked to before stopped me in the hallway to ask about summer plans or college choices. I wasn't watching life happen from the computer lab anymore. I was actually participating in it. Brooklyn added me to her close friends list on Instagram and started sending me memes she thought I'd find funny. Wade invited me to his graduation party and specifically asked me to bring Harris. Arthur asked if I wanted to join a group going to see a movie the weekend before finals. Everything shifted, and suddenly I had plans on Friday nights and people texting me asking where I was. Amelia and I studied together for final exams, meeting at the library or the coffee shop, or sometimes at her house when her parents were home. We developed this system where we'd quiz each other, and whoever got more answers right got to pick what we did afterward. She usually won at chemistry, and I usually won at calculus, and we split history and English. My college acceptance letters started arriving in April, and I got into 3 schools, including my top choice in the city. 2 days later, Amelia texted me freaking out because she'd gotten into her top choice too, which happened to be in the same city as mine. Not the same school, but close enough that we could visit easily. maybe a 20-minute subway ride between campuses. We made plans to explore the city together over the summer before classes started, to find the best coffee shops and figure out the public transportation and just get comfortable being there. Graduation day arrived with perfect weather, sunny but not too hot, and I sat with Harris and the other computer lab regulars in our assigned section. The ceremony was long and boring with too many speeches from administrators and the valedictorian. When they finally started calling names, I walked across the stage and grabbed my diploma, hearing my mom scream from somewhere in the audience. After the ceremony ended and everyone threw their caps in the air, Amelia found me in the crowd and told me her family was having a celebration dinner at a restaurant downtown. She'd already told her parents she was bringing me, and they'd saved a seat. Both our families ended up at the same restaurant, sitting at a long table they'd pushed together. My mom and Amelia's mom discovered they both loved the same cooking shows and spent half the dinner discussing recipes. My dad and her dad talked about sports and work. My little sister asked Amelia a million questions about college and what it was like being popular. The whole thing felt natural and easy, like our families had known each other for years, instead of just meeting officially. 3 months had passed since that Snapchat notification changed everything. I was heading to college in the fall with an amazing girlfriend, actual friends who included me in their plans, and confidence I never thought I'd have. The girl I'd been watching for 3 years had been watching me right back the whole time, both of us too scared to make the first move. Sometimes the best things happen when you finally take a chance and type 2 words and hit send before you can talk yourself out of it.